Tonight on Free Minds TV, we discuss a small Colorado town that has shut down one man's operation crafting artisan sleds because they say he's in a residential neighborhood and you can't do manufacturing there. We'll also be telling you about where the new world record for the world's largest meatball was set, talking about the war on drugs, the Downsizer Dispatch, and a whole lot more tonight on Free Minds TV. Now that was a good intro. It was worth the 4 takes.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. It is episode 132, and it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
And welcome back from the short break. We took a couple of weeks where we showed the Pumpkin Fest special that we did live from the Pumpkin Fest 2009 here in Keene, New Hampshire. And so we hadn't done a regular show in a couple weeks, so welcome back. It's good to be back on the air. I did want to say real quick for the people who are watching this video who have been trying to go to our website, a lot of the links on it aren't working properly, but we are aware of the problem and we are trying to fix that. So if you've been to freemindstv.com or freemindsmedia.org, however you're getting to our site, there's a lot of issues with it. We're trying to work on those problems, so hopefully they will be fixed, maybe by the time you're even seeing this. So check that out. And hopefully it'll be back up and working up at freemindstv.com. But anyways, we do have a lot to get into, tons of stories to get to. We've been gone for a couple of weeks, so we've got some old news to get into, as well as talk about some of the more recent stuff. I wanted to start off, as you stated here, Nick, over in Colorado, Silverton, Colorado, to be more specific, where the town has shut down the manufacturing of sleds in one man's home. Yes, the owner of Mountain Boy Sled Works, a man by the name of Bryce Hoskin, has been in the business for 7 years in Silverton, Colorado, but he has recently been shut down. Yes, the councilman put a cease and desist order on his residence from manufacturing sleds because he does not live in a zoning district that allows manufacturing. Now, what Mr. Bryce Hoskin is contending is he's not manufacturing sleds, he's crafting sleds. These are handmade wooden sleds. He churns out about 200 of them with his 7 employees. They churn out 200 of these wooden sleds every year. Now, I also wanted to note before we get into it that there are only 100 jobs, winter jobs, in Silverton, Colorado. So 7 of these 100 jobs, that's 7% of the workforce, has now been put out of work essentially because there's not a manufacturing district and he's manufacturing sleds. So Nick, what's it matter? What's the difference between manufacturing and crafting? Now, my mother works at home. She's an artist. She paints original paintings. Is she manufacturing original handcrafted paintings, or is she simply just crafting them? Is there a difference? Where's the line between crafting and manufacturing? And also, before I go into this, it should be noticed that Mountain Boy Sleds also owns operations in China where they do manufacture over 8,000 sleds a year. These are the handcrafted versions. So what differentiates it, and where should government step in and start shutting people down?
I don't really see much of a role for government to step in and shut down people's cottage industries, their home industries at all. I object to zoning rules on principle. But we were having this discussion, Toby, before we came on air, and I was kind of having trouble differentiating between what is crafting something and what is manufacturing it, because he is crafting sleds that could be considered works of art, or something like fine furniture, a work that really requires an artisan to make it, but he is still manufacturing the sleds. And he does still actually have employees. So it might be a very small scale manufacturing of these sleds, but he is manufacturing them. Where I have a problem with what's happening in this story is that the city is, or the town, it doesn't have very many jobs there, so I'm assuming there aren't that many people. The city is stepping in and essentially telling this man what he can and can't do within his own home. Now, some people will say, well, we don't want factories in the middle of residential neighborhoods. There are ways to do that through deed restrictions, and it just generally, as a rule of thumb, you're not going to build a warehouse or some kind of a factory in a residential neighborhood because the value of the land there is a lot more expensive. Just doesn't make sense. For the same reason, someone's not going to put a pig farm in the suburbs either, because they can make a lot more money subdividing up that land and selling it off for houses. So there are market forces here that sort of preclude a lot of the nightmare scenarios people talk about where you'd essentially have a big factory right next to your house. Maybe if you live way out in the woods and they happen to build right next to you.
Right.
But so, I mean, is he crafting the sleds? Is he manufacturing them? I don't know. It is kind of a gray area.
I really don't know. I mean, if it's a piece of art, does that make it a craft? I mean, what if you are cranking out paintings one after another? Are you now manufacturing them? Is there some sort of a time period that if you are doing it too quickly, now you're manufacturing versus crafting? It just seems like so much gray area. And as you said, Nick, I think there are a lot of market forces already in play that people aren't going to be setting up huge businesses out of their homes. Yes, people will craft small things, stuff on the side. But I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem.
The only grounds where I could see somebody complaining is if there was manufacturing going on that was producing, say, a lot of smoke and odors that really don't belong in a residential neighborhood, or a lot of loud noise at off hours of the day. I mean, I can see people complaining about those things if they're disruptive to other people's property in the area. But just the simple fact that somebody is actually doing something industrious and productive in their home, I don't think that's a bad thing. In fact, I think that's something we need more of.
Well, especially in this economy where there's jobs, it's tough to get a job, and you're talking about a small town. Getting rid of 7% of the jobs just because of zoning restrictions seems asinine to me. The gentleman, Mr. Bristol guy, Bryce Hoskin, the owner of this company, Mountain Boy Sled Works, is saying that it's a personal vendetta that's getting him shut down, and he's having an argument with one of the councilmen, and that's why they decided to go after him and target him. So a vendetta is essentially cutting out 7% of the workforce in a town. It just seems this is the problem with government. When you get people in power, they do really stupid, asinine things with that power. They don't always use the power as it's supposed to be given to them. This case, I don't know. I'm not there. But he's alleging that it's a personal vendetta. Even if it's not, it just seems stupid to me.
Yeah, well, really there are a lot of vendettas in small town politics, particularly small town. I mean, it can happen in a big city too, but people tend to pretty much know everybody else in a really small town, and it sounds like Silverton is a really small town. I grew up in a town of 600 people, and, coming from rural New Hampshire, I can kind of understand that, because I think at any small town, when you've got these zoning boards and other officials around, they do tend to treat people differently based on their own personal opinions of them. The fact of the matter is, people aren't perfect. But when you create a government to control people, who's going to run that government? Well, people. And they are going to bring their personal baggage into the way they govern, whether it's a small town or a large city or a state or a country. So whenever you put this power structure out there, or create some new wing of government authority, whether it's a zoning board or some kind of police advisory board, the people who are elected to those positions, there's potential for them to abuse it there, and a certain percentage of those people are going to abuse it. Some people might actually just be trying to participate and express their views and do what they believe is the right thing, but there are a lot of people who are going to be attracted to those positions of power because they know they can punish their enemies and reward their friends.
Yes, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolute. Absolutely. All right. If you have a different opinion on this, you can send it to us, fmtv@freemindsmedia.org is the email address. But for now, let's move on. Let's go over and pick on the nanny state over in the UK, because they are always doing really stupid things. They're usually just a cut above us in how stupid they are. They don't have that pesky constitution to slow them down. I mean, we're right on the path of tyranny and nanny statism ourselves. The constitution does help slow things down. It's kind of it hampers things a bit. It gets in the way, but I mean, it's not going to stop the ever-encroaching government. But in many ways, the United Kingdom is socially a lot like the U.S. Yes. I mean, there's a common language there, and a lot of the traditions and a lot of the legal system that we have here in the U.S. came from English common law. So there is a lot of similarity there, and it's important to look at places like Great Britain, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and see what's happening there, because I think it gives you a good idea of what happens when you don't have a constitution that places firm limits on government, or at least one that's not very well respected. Yeah, and it also makes for some silly commentary too, because they that's all they are. They're silly over in the UK. The latest thing they've done is Watford Borough Council has now banned all parents and adults, other caregivers, from entering play areas where their children are at play because, quote, they have not undergone criminal background checks. Yes, it has happened. The government has banned parents from going to the playground with their kids because they haven't undergone criminal background checks and they can't be around their kids on public playgrounds. Instead, what are called play rangers or government-approved caregivers will watch your child while they're on the playground and play with your child while on the playground while you can watch from a fenced-in area and observe your child playing. But no more playing with them, no more going out with little precious snowflake and playing with them on the swings. No, that will now be done by a play ranger. Nick, I thought this was a story from The Onion because that's a fake news organization, because it's just so ridiculous to think we need to protect kids from their parents. Well, yes, if you're looking at abuse, most abuse does stem from the home. But come on, you're banning parents from going to the playground with their kids because they haven't undergone criminal background checks. How about this? Just take the kids away at birth, and we'll give them to government officials, and government will raise them all the way. I mean, that's what we're coming to here, Nick. When you're saying a parent can go to a public playground with their kid because they haven't gone through a criminal background check, you're essentially...
It's freaky.
I mean, it's...
No, it is freaky, and it's not as if, I mean, from a safety standpoint, from what they're supposedly trying to do here in the name of protecting the children, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if the parents are a threat to children, well, they have children, and they're going to be able to molest those children or do whatever it is people are concerned that these parents might do on the playground. They can do that to the kids at home. And these play rangers, just because they've gone through a government background check, doesn't mean they're not sick freaks.
It just means they haven't been caught.
It means they haven't been caught. But a lot of criminals can have quite a lengthy career and either never get caught or get caught 20 years into it. Most criminals don't get caught on their first offense. And I'm not trying to poke fun at anybody here. There are a lot of people who spend times in their profession or as volunteers with kids because they're nice people. They want to, do something nice for kids. But there's also the fact that sickos might be attracted to a position where you're a playground ranger. I mean, if you're the kind of sicko that's going to try to pick a kid up from the playground, which is actually pretty rare. As we've said, most child molestation and abduction happens by people, either parents or, in many cases, other relatives, uncles,
usually within
aunts,
the home,
cousins, things like that. But within an extended family, that's usually where most of the danger is. It's not so much stranger danger as a lot of people think. But if you're trying to address that danger of strange people on the playground, I'm not sure these playground rangers are necessarily squeaky clean all of the time.
Yeah, it just seems so ridiculous. Wait, someday it'll come to America too. I mean, if we continue down on this nanny state route that we're on, parents can't do anything. Now everything has to be done by the government. I mean, we'll be here soon enough. Someday, will you be allowed to go to the playground with with Johnny? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds.
Might have to be a vetted play ranger.
I mean, it sounds almost Stalinist to me. I mean, it is.
The next step
ridiculous.
is taking the kids at birth and having government officials raise them. That's what it seems. What else could you do? That's the next step. I mean, they're already going to their government schools where we're discouraging.
And in many states, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to homeschool. So kids are essentially forced to attend compulsory education, compulsory government-run education from, in many cases, kindergarten through 12th grade. And it's very difficult to seek alternative avenues if you don't have a lot of money, and homeschooling is restricted. And I think that there is an advancement here, sort of a progression, where at least over in the UK, the government is essentially trying to take the rearing of kids away from the family and make it the responsibility of the state. And that is something that is very troubling. I mean, that is what they did in Nazi Germany, in Stalinist Russia. That's usually what they do right before they start killing lots of people.
Well,
and quite seriously, that is usually what precedes the actual totalitarian crackdown.
Well, we will continue to report on such asinine things that governments are doing. But for now, let's shift issues and see where you can actually do something about it. We try to do that each week with the Downsizer Dispatch. And what do you got for us this week, Nick?
Well, this week we're dealing with the healthcare reform bill. And Downsize DC is thanking the staff over at Reason Magazine for drawing attention to a Denver Post column that was written by David Harsani. And this is basically some text from that. It's a template letter to your representative, so-called in Washington. I object to the 1,900-page House health care bill precisely because it's 1,900 pages long. That's too much complexity. I object because the word regulation appears in this bill 181 times. The word tax appears 214 times, and the word fees is used 103 times. I hate these words, and I won't feel too good about you either if you inflict them on me. I object because you're not going to read this bill before you vote on it, or sit with the federal code to look it up and read all the parts of existing law that will be changed by this bill. I mean, how could you? The bill itself is 1,900 pages long, and it mentions other massive bills that are already part of the code. I object because the bill will require federal bureaucrats to write hundreds or even thousands of pages of regulations to fill in the details, and because I will have to pay for lawyers and accountants, either directly or indirectly, to interpret and comply with this mess. I object because many of my healthcare choices will be dictated by a Health Choices Commissioner and an Inspector General for Health Choices Administration. I won't be able to elect or fire either of these people, and I don't want them in my life. I object because this bill costs too much, and because you're hiding the true cost in a variety of fraudulent ways. I object because it is increasingly clear to me that my supposed representatives really represent their party leadership first, special interest lobbyists second, and me never. Please stop and consider that this bill will be imposed on me at the point of a policeman's gun. If I do not pay for it or comply with it, armed men will eventually knock down my door and force me to submit. Please don't do that to me. And that's the text of the letter. If you want to go to downsizedc.org and send that letter or something similar to your representatives in Washington, you can. Again, it's downsizedc.org. It only takes a couple of minutes, and you can sign up for their dispatch list, get daily or semi-daily updates on bills that are threatening to our freedoms and liberty, and bills that are trying to roll back the size of government and protect our freedoms and liberty.
All right, Nick, when we come back, we are going to be getting into the world's most biggest, giantest, best ever, I don't know about the best ever, but definitely largest, heaviest meatball, where that world record was set, as well as some talk about the war on drugs, all that and a whole lot more coming up. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV. And welcome back to Free Minds TV. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
I'd like to invite you to join the members area. It's only $3 a month or $30 a year. In these tough economic times, I know it's hard, but we would really appreciate the support. It doesn't only get you tons in return, tons of bonus video, all the old archives, tons of bonus radio shows, but it also really helps support Free Minds TV and Free Minds Media projects in general. So sign up today up at freemindsmedia.org. And I think that even though some of the site issues are giving problems, the member side is still good to go. So sign up today. All right, Nick, we've got a lot more to talk about. We are going to be getting into this giant meatball record, how big it was and where the record was set. It's some good news, I think. I'm pretty pumped about it. But first, I wanted to get into some older news that we didn't get to talk about yet because we were on the Pumpkin Fest break and such. And it's really a bigger issue that we've talked about many times, but having to do with the medical marijuana bill that had been passed the Senate, passed the New Hampshire House, and then had been vetoed by the governor. It went in. And then there was the summer recess where people were lobbying for a veto override. And that override did happen in the New Hampshire House, but sadly just fell short in the New Hampshire Senate. So medical marijuana is still illegal. Sick and dying people are still considered criminals if they get the medicine they need because of a few foolish representatives who think they know better than doctors and sick, dying patients.
Actually, the vote was 2 in the Senate. That was what was required, was 2 New Hampshire senators to switch their vote and vote for an override. But the support wasn't there, and it wasn't too much of a surprise. As we said, this happened, I think, a week ago, a little bit more actually. But it wasn't too much of a surprise. There wasn't a great expectation that the senators would actually change their position. So everybody kind of saw this coming, that it was not likely to get overridden this time around. Hopefully, I mean, next time a medical marijuana bill comes up or a general marijuana decrim bill, the governor will have somewhat changed his position.
Well, this is what I'm more hoping, Nick. I'm hoping that New Hampshire residents, and I know this is similar in many places. We don't just broadcast in New Hampshire, so people are watching in Maine or Florida or anywhere else are saying, well, why are you just talking about New Hampshire? Well, we like to focus in on New Hampshire, but probably similar things are happening wherever you are from as well. I mean, there's only 13 states that have legalized medical marijuana, and others are making efforts, but there are certain individuals standing in the way, even though polls are showing most of the citizens want change. So I just wanted to throw that out there and then say this. I want people to start kicking these useless representatives out of office who are voting the wrong way, Nick. Because it is clear that the New Hampshire people have spoken, well over 70%. A supermajority of the New Hampshire citizenry want medical marijuana. They want to decriminalize marijuana. Yet, over and over again now, the representatives are not representing them. They're representing the police unions. They're representing the people who make a profit off of putting people behind bars, and they're not looking out for you and me and the sick and dying people, Nick.
Well,
and I think it's high time that people actually start voting. Be like, look, you don't represent me. It's time to get out. Let's put someone in that will represent me instead of the police union. Because the New Hampshire people have spoken. They want medical marijuana legalized. The majority of them want marijuana decriminalized. Yet, the people representing the police unions sure don't. And so I think people should go on, check out the roll call, and you can do this up at nhcommonsense.org is where you can go in the whole roll call, see how your senator voted, see how your representative voted, and definitely kick out this douchebag of a governor that we have.
Well, there are many other issues where I disagree with Governor Lynch. He's in my opinion, he doesn't do much for people who aren't familiar with New Hampshire.
He's a bad little man.
I strongly disagree with on this, and I would actually kind of prefer that next time something like this comes up, it actually goes to an override as opposed to the governor changing his mind, because it would make him look like a fool. But Toby, I wanted to mention that you had mentioned the police officers unions, or I think it's a police chiefs association here in New Hampshire, lobbies against really any move to decriminalize marijuana, even if it's medical marijuana, because they know that a lot of police officers' jobs rely on keeping marijuana illegal. That generates a lot of arrests and a lot of work for them. We might not actually need so many police officers if it wasn't for the war on drugs, and a lot of the war on drugs is a war on marijuana. But there are police officers out there who do disagree with the war on drugs, or at least the war on marijuana, and they can see that it's a counterproductive policy. I've talked to a lot of officers. Some have actually come out and publicly said how they felt about it. Others are on the force, and they're not particularly marijuana decrim advocates or activists. But if you ask them their personal opinion, yeah, they think the laws against marijuana are kind of stupid, because though marijuana is not causing the problems they run into. I mean, when they get called to a scene where two people have been in a fight or where there's been an auto accident, if there is a drug involved at all, it's usually alcohol. It's not marijuana. So there is support out there in the law enforcement community. It's just not generally at the higher levels. And I don't think that there's too much to be gained by trying to express your displeasure with the drug laws to the police. By all means, I mean, you can tell them how you feel about it, but I know that here in Key, New Hampshire, we have the 420 protests going on, which is still running. I think it's, 3 weeks?
It's well over a month at this point.
It's well over a month. But, and I think that initially that was a pretty good protest. I think that some of the tactics involving bullhorns, yelling at, basically town hall, that's not going to do too much. Town hall really, essentially the protesters here in Keene have been left alone. The police aren't bothering them unless they're going there to serve a warrant on someone else or something to that effect. For the most part, they're leaving the crowd alone, although the crowd's kind of attempted, in some cases, to stir up confrontation with the police, which I think is counterproductive. If you're trying to convince people that the right thing to do is to scale back the war on drugs, or at least decriminalize, say, medical marijuana, you're not building any bridges by yelling at police officers. What you do need to do is participate in the process. Yeah. And I wish more people would do that, because...
Well, if some of these people put the same energy into getting rid of these horrible representatives that don't represent us, I think we might be a lot further. If we had, I mean, I know a lot of people just don't believe in the process. They think that it's useless, it's not going to get us anywhere. But I mean, if it's the same energy was put into this as is put into some of the civil disobedience that I think in a lot of cases is counterproductive. I mean, you see a lot of people, I've been reading the comments that are on these news stories, and a lot of people are really getting sick and tired of it. I mean, you're putting out the stereotypical image of a marijuana smoker in a lot of these cases by going to these protests. I mean, a lot of these things, the videos I've watched from them are a little bit embarrassing at times, especially when you have people getting up in police officers' faces and yelling at them. So I think that people's efforts could be better utilized if they presented themselves in a more professional manner.
And this goes, and this is a general thing. I mean, I think there are a lot of people out there, not necessarily civil disobedience-oriented activists. That's kind of something that you really only can relate to if you're probably in Keene or part of New Hampshire. That doesn't go on in too many other places around the country. But there are a lot of people out there who would go to a smoke out, or, you know, they are marijuana users, but they're not. And even if you're not, I think there's still,
most of the people who go there aren't smoking. They're just showing their support, but they're showing it in an embarrassing way.
But there are a lot of people out there who do nothing. Just as a general rule, there are people out there who will complain about the drug laws, who have been burned by these drug laws. They've done nothing wrong, but perhaps somebody out there watching, or somebody you're related to, somebody you know, has faced a marijuana charge, that has followed them around, that has hurt their career. And they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't hurt anybody. They didn't steal anything. They weren't putting anybody in jeopardy. They were just doing what they wanted with their own body. And I think that is a problem. And I wish that more people out there who had been burned, who are angry and cynical, would simply get involved in the process, because I think this is a winnable fight.
The number
if
one
you do
thing,
it the right way.
We need to vote out the drug warriors. Get rid of those representatives. They're no longer representing the people. Get those people out. See how your representatives vote. Let them know that you're unhappy with them if they voted the wrong way, and then get them out. I mean, let's make some real changes. Anyways, Nick, we do have to move on. I got to get to this meatball article because we're running out of time, and people, they've been pumped. We've been teasing it since the beginning of the show, and I know a lot of people were disappointed. We just fell short of breaking the record for the most lit jack-o'-lanterns this past Pumpkin Fest.
Here in Keene, New
Hampshire, by just over 1,000 pumpkins. I think we're 29,068 pumpkins. We needed 31,124 or something. Those numbers aren't exact, but we just missed it. But luckily, the owner of Nanny's Italian Eatery, Mr. Matthew Mitninsky, he has brought...
That can't be right.
Mitninsky.
I guess it didn't sound Italian. I'm sorry.
I don't know if he's Italian. He does own Nanny's Italian Eatery. He has brought the title of the world's largest meatball to New Hampshire, one of the places where meatballs were originated here in New England. And he brought the title to New Hampshire with a giant meatball weighing in at 222.5 pounds, busting up the record that had been set a month ago of 198 pounds in Los Angeles. There was a previous record to that of 109 pounds, so he's smushed the competition with Meatnik, and I say, great. Meatballs are good. The biggest ones coming to New Hampshire, even better. I wish I could be there so I could get a little bit of that meatball. It did look large.
I don't know if it would be any good.
Nick, I would eat the meatball.
Too large.
Meat is good.
I can't imagine the center was cooked.
Meat is good, and world records are good, and I'm all about it. Oh, he cooked it up.
I'm sure he cooked it, but I don't know that
See
it
the
cooked
video
properly.
Anyways, we're out of time. You have different opinions. FMTV at freemindsmedia.org. freemindsmedia.org is the website. And until next week, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a great night.